Welcome in, everyone. We love having you here at the Voice of College Football. This is our college football show that we present each and every Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, the College Football Show. And maybe not necessarily for most of you, but for us media types, when you say media days, that kind of triggers that's the start. It doesn't stop from here. Media
Right.
days this week at the Big 12. The SEC next week, then the ACC and the Big Ten, and then boom, right into August camp, and there's no looking back from there. So welcome in. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. I am flanked by one Nathan Brown. Nathan, it's always great to see you. You can catch Nathan's work and the rest of the crew there at College Football Mafia, and we will have that information for you on the screen. Nathan, good to see you. How are you?
I'm glad to be here. It is July. It's the hot days when we sit in and buckle up for the season coming up. I think the word you're looking for is Pavlovian. It back of your brain, you hear that little twitch that says, now it's time for football. And so the summer meetings lead into the fall camp, and I can't wait.
Yeah, now that I'm doing what I'm doing here, obviously as my own boss, it's one thing. But when I was working the local television affiliate
Mhm.
circuit and I was headed to SEC Media Days every year, well, got to get those vacations and everything else in before that because once it's Media Days again,
Right.
and at that point, they were right at the end of July because they would step off the bus on the way back and go right at August camp.
Yes.
Now we've kind of staggered it throughout the month as it's become more of a media event for all of these schools. So the Big 12 with 16 schools has packed it into 2 days. So let's start with the big man himself, Brett Yormark, who we commented, Nathan and I were talking before we started to record, that usually gives us something to go on because he is, I think he's done an exceptional job for what he has to deal with and all the challenges that are unlike anything that his predecessors had to deal with in any of these conferences. But he's got his work cut out for him, but he is still one of the big four, and he's got a deep football league, and he certainly expressed that today. So your thoughts about Brett Yormark, what you heard him say today, and we'll get into this playoff format discussion as well.
Right. So I think I've been a fan of Brett Yormark since he's taken over the reins at the Big 12. I think he's done a good job of raising the profile of the conference. Obviously, BYU being in the conference, I'm kind of selfish when we look at these different things and how they matter out in the world. And he's never shy about giving quotes. So the quotes that really stood out to me, and I'll read a couple of them, and then we can talk about them in detail as you want to. But the first one was specifically about the 5-11 playoff. He has two quotes here. He says, "I'm doubling down today on the 5-11 rather than the 4-4XX, whatever playoff format you might get." He expects that Jim Phillips at ACC Media Days will come out and say the exact same thing he is. So it's obvious now that in the past we assumed they were on the same page. Now he's admitting that they're actually doing that. They're working together, trying to keep that signaling down. And that, well, there's two pieces. First off, he says the 5-11 is best for the Big 12 because we don't want to be given anything. We want to go out and earn our access to the CFP. The second half of this, and this is the thing that I found was quite interesting, is he says the memorandum of understanding, the MOU they signed for the CFP last year, doesn't necessarily grant sole and exclusive power to the Big Ten and the SEC. The reason that matters is because that playoff format, everybody's assumed that they're going to be driving the bus. So out of those two things, just one, doubling down on the 5-11, and two, saying, hey, they don't necessarily get everything they want just because they were given the power a year and a half ago, I found very interesting because we've never heard that before. That quote does not necessarily grant sole and exclusive power is remarkable. That if we were to been given that information a year and a half ago, the messaging, at least from me and my team, would have been different, right? We would have had an understanding that maybe there was more we could have done to earn that respect. And so, and that then leads into the reason that he's doubling down on 5-11, because he's saying it might not go all the way of the Big Ten and the SEC.
So I think with a situation like this, Nathan, when there's a decision to be made and it's a public decision, that there are two ways to look at it. One, the leader, Brett Yormark in this case, has to look at it to say just the nuts and bolts, regardless of anybody's perception of this, their criticism, what is going to benefit the Big 12 more? Is it going to be the 5-11 or is it going to be this 4-4-2-2-1-3?
Right.
And then the next thing he is to look at is, regardless of what the nuts and bolts say about most likely what's going to help us, what is the perception of our push, of our preference? This is what I think, is that if you say we're the Big 12 and we're going to accept this 4-4-2-2 model, then you're basically saying we're an inferior league to the SEC and the Big 10. We are half of what they are. That's what you're telling the masses if you accept the 4-4-2-2 model. So I don't think he wants to do that. But from a logistical standpoint of what's likely to happen, obviously, if you take the 2 spots, automatic, you get 2 spots in the playoff.
Yeah.
If you take the 5-11, I got to think that the Big 12 is most likely going to land with 2 teams in a 16-team field most of the time. But the likelihood of the Big 12 getting that 3rd team, I'd really have to weigh that out. I don't think it's very likely. So they're probably landing in the same spot regardless, although with the 4-4-2-2, you're guaranteeing the 2nd team, which they would not. I'm trying to think. I think by running the system last year, BYU would have been elevated into a 16th position. They were number 17.
They were 17
before postseason play if there was a 4-4-2-2. But otherwise, they would have been left out, and it would have just been Arizona State.
Yeah, so this is the dichotomy, and it's absolutely black and white to Big 12 land. You either support it or you don't. The way I look at it is like this. I would rather have the guaranteed spot, and I don't care what your perception of me is, because once I get in the tournament, I'll show you how good I am. We'll win some games, right? I'm being more pragmatic and saying I just want that 2nd team, no matter what, to be in the race, so that you can compete. I don't necessarily believe every year the Big 12 is going to get a 2nd team, let alone a 3rd team every year. So the argument, and he said this himself, Brett Yormark said this himself, he doesn't want anybody to look at the conference like they're less than, because they codify the 2 that they would get every year. I look at it the reverse. How bad does the Big 12 conference look if that every year, or say 2 out of 6 years, are the only 2 that you get more than 1 team in? What does that make the Big 12 conference look like? It makes it look even worse, in my opinion. So I'd rather take the upfront hit and say, let's get as many teams in there as we can, guaranteed, and then have them get in there and win some games, than the reverse of, you might earn a 2nd team, but how many people see a 3rd team coming from the Big 12 in the next 5-6 years? It's pretty hard for me to see that. So I'm on the other side of the fence. I have since this was first announced. Everybody knows I'm on record to say I think the 4-4. I would prefer a 3-3-3-3 or a 4-4-3-3. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could be better, but at a bare minimum, I like the 4-4-2-2 because it does give you that 2nd team. So we will find out. Time will tell which would have been the better strategy. We won't know this year. But we might know in 3 years how that bet has turned out. So we'll have to find out. All I want to tell people is that I'm on record saying that I don't necessarily think this is the greatest thing. And the perception battle, that's what he keeps looking back at. We don't want to be perceived as a less than conference, half of what the Big Ten and the SEC are, just out the gate. I say you might end up there anyway if you only qualify 1 team in a majority of seasons. So we'll have to see.
And it's a great point that you make when you emphasize the word guaranteed 2 spots, that it's not that you're locked into 2 spots. It's that that's a minimum. So there is a possibility. It's not a huge possibility, but in the right situation, if you really have a dominant team that makes it in, and then you got a couple 10-2s hanging around that just make that cut, and maybe you get 3 in.
Right.
because that is just a minimum.
Yes. I don't know. We'll see. Last year, like you said, BYU was the 17th team. If people don't think that meant something, they don't know what they're talking about, because it was left out at 17, knowing that we would have this revisionist history that would look back and say, well, see, BYU, the Big 12 wouldn't even have had a second team in. So what are we even talking about trying to give them a second or a third spot? Because look, in the one year they had a two-team, a two-loss team that really should have been in the thing, strength of schedule and everything else. They're still not in there, and that's not a perception loss. I just don't, I look at it like this. If I'm BYU, I want to get into the tournament. Then once we're in the tournament, let's go and win some games. But you're not going to win. You can't win games that never occurred because you don't make the tournament.
The thing we can't account for, Nathan, is the integrity of the committee. Now,
Right.
I will say this, that in 11 years of a college football playoff, all of them with a 14 playoff, except, of course, last year, I don't like the committee. I don't like that there's a committee, but I have to admit, I don't have any huge issues with their selections. I think there's a couple that could be questioned, but if they would have selected that team instead of that team, then I would just question it the other way. So they
Right.
haven't made any egregious errors at all. And if anything, we have to pat them on the back from the Big 12 and ACC perspective last year, in that they, when faced with SMU in particular, they went that route instead of dropping down a game or a loss to 3 losses and ushering in the likes of South Carolina, Alabama, or Ole Miss.
Right.
So they made what I thought was the proper decision there. But the thing that's funny is that in this 5-11 process, they have the power, which they've had the power all along.
Right.
But if you box them into this 4-4-2-2 business, and then you get these automatic spots, that limits their authority. So we've trusted them this far, and they've basically delivered reasonable selections. So I see no reason from just not a Big 12 perspective, but just a national perspective of doing what should be fair. If we trust their judgment,
Right.
then it would be the 5+11 deal.
I could advocate for 5-11 just as easily. I love arguing the opposite points, and a lot of cases I'll take an opposite view just to be the opposite view. In this case, I don't think it is 6 and 1 half does the other, though. I think we're going to end up finding out where, for one thing, we're still only 12. So right now it's 5 plus 7. And if you get two more teams in, that gives you opens more opportunity, right? Four more teams in, and you go to 11 at large. Great. I'm all happy and I'm satisfied with that. I just don't think in the long run we're going to look back and we're going to see an empowered Big 12 that every year is fighting for a third, let alone a second spot. Because if in your head right now, all you're concerned about is what the PR hit looks like and the fact that you want to get a second team in, then go with the guaranteed spot. What's the purpose of having to fight for that when you can just get it out the gate versus you run the risk every year of not getting a second team in, let alone a third. What does the world look on that in 2030, 31? How does it look at the Big 12 then?
We do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. This is our Monday through Friday, the College Football Show, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We bring on great guests. We've got about 7 or 8 lined up from the Big 12 this week. This is Big 12 Media Days, Tuesday and Wednesday, but we're going to stretch it on through the rest of the week with Big 12 guests and a familiar one right here, Nathan Brown. You can catch him at College Football Mafia. So what do you guys have cooking this week, Nathan?
Probably I was going to do a show, whether tonight or tomorrow, I was going to do a show wrapping up the meetings, the Big 12 Media Days. I think coming out of that, you're going to have several front runners to win the conference. That's part of the problem, is that you do have 6, 7, you could go 9 deep every year if you wanted to, of a team that could win that conference. And I just don't know where we're going to end up at the end of the season. I do know this: it'll be extremely entertaining. Big 12 plays good brand of football. The defense has come up. It's no longer the 66 to 59 type score line. So if you don't know Big 12 football, I would encourage you to tune in and watch that. But it should be a good season. We can jump right into the fact that they got rid of the media poll this year, right? They got rid of the media poll, and I'm going to ask you a question. What is your perception? Because the Big Ten doesn't do a media poll either. How do you look at these media polls?
Well, I know that the media at times have self-reported on themselves to go back and look at their own selections, and they're not that impressive. It's very similar to the AP preseason poll. I
Right.
typically do a video on the AP preseason poll, and I'll look back over the previous, let's say, 5 seasons, where usually I would guess the average is about 4 of the top 10 teams in America in preseason don't not finish in the top 10. They don't finish ranked at all.
Right.
Anywhere.
Right.
So it's not that impressive. They usually hit on about 13 to 15 out of the top 25, which you would think you should be able to throw darts and do about that well.
Yeah.
Last season, of course, they infamously in the Big 12 selected Arizona State last, and they won the conference. And the year before it was West Virginia, and they went 9-4.
Yep.
So that doesn't bode too well for their judgment. But it is the most difficult conference to select.
Oh, there's no doubt. And I think getting rid of the media poll in the long run over the period of years will make a difference. Changing the paradigm that your conference can be won by anybody. That's how you spin that as a positive. If you put a media poll together and then every year it's flip-flopped from your worst to first, that does not look good. And so I'm for it. I was just curious how you felt about it.
Yeah, so I have a high level of confidence in 2 programs in this conference. Not that they're going to be playing in the championship game. That's not what I'm saying this particular year. But I think Texas Tech kind of jumps up and Baylor jumps up, and obviously Colorado's been what they've been under Dion. But it's Kansas State and Iowa State. I have a large amount of respect for Oklahoma State. Yes, this past year was, of course, a disaster, and they may have a rough one coming up again this year. But Iowa State and Kansas State, and I think it's a really good showcase for the Big 12 that those 2 are playing in week 0 over in Dublin, because sure, we usually get a decent game. I think last year was Florida State, Georgia Tech, but this one's about as good as I can remember any 2 teams getting together in week 0.
And it's a conference game.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that makes it even bigger. I completely agree with you. I think that's right. The BYU and Texas Tech this year may be the one off year, but they're both recruiting top 25 or higher in overall recruits for 2026. So that's what I would tell everybody to pay attention to. Watch for Texas Tech and BYU to stay, again, competitive at the top. But 2026 is the year I'd point everybody to for both those programs.
So, Nathan, when we bring up those 2 programs, the first thing that comes to mind with anyone tracking this at all, you don't have to be tracking it much below the surface. For Texas Tech, it's, oh, well, they're pouring money into this situation.
Right.
Well, BYU has been a football giant, a very competitive program here for at least 45 years. Something in that range is when they really hit the map. But we don't think about BYU over prioritizing football. Of course, you have to be committed to it to be as good as BYU's been, but it's kind of strange to put them in that same barrel and category with Texas Tech.
Except that I would say BYU spending similar type money.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah. The difference is the Texas Tech is willing to flaunt the money. They're willing to tell you how much they're spending. You're not going to get that out of BYU. You're not going to know until much later date how much they're totally investing in. But right now, BYU nationwide is 19th for recruiting for 2026, and they're near the top if in 2027 recruiting. So, yeah, I think revenue sharing in the NIL, using advertising to pay players is something that both Texas Tech and BYU are doing. I kind of like being under the radar a little bit. It makes me, I'm glad Texas Tech's getting all the attention, but BYU's doing the exact same thing, and they're just not gloating about it.
Yeah, and then of course they picked up this quarterback Ryder Lyons, and
Yep.
that made big news because they plucked him away as one of the
Yeah.
best quarterbacks in the country from a lot of elite programs.
Yes, for sure.
Got Nathan Brown here breaking down college football, the Big 12 in particular, with media days going on in Dallas or just north of Dallas Tuesday and Wednesday this week. So we will be talking Big 12 all week here at the Voice of College Football, and catch Nathan's work there at College Football Mafia. It's easy to find right here on YouTube. So since we are narrowing down to your team, of course, it made national news a few weeks ago with the Jake Retzlaff situation, where I hope in these type situations above anything else, just so justice was served in regards to there being allegations about sexual misconduct,
Right.
and those have been dismissed. And so it's just a consensual sex incident between he and the young lady. Okay. That obviously would not be an issue elsewhere. It is at BYU. He would be suspended, I believe, for 7 games.
That's right. Yeah.
And so he is looking to move on, correct?
Yes. Yeah. We fully anticipate him transferring out. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got a quarterback situation here with McKay Hillstead. He played at Utah State, 11 touchdowns, 8 picks. So all 3 of these, well, the first 2 guys here have played some. So it's not like they're foreign to hitting the field against some decent teams, but
Right.
not much experience when you talk about Hillstead and Trayson Bourget, Western Michigan, 4 touchdown passes for him, and Bear Bachmeyer. So is there any reason to have any level of confidence? And how has this soured the BYU fan base in regards to being optimistic about this season?
Well, I don't know. Well, I can tell you what this BYU fan person believes, and I would tell this to not only BYU fans but greater college football. BYU was in the top 15 nationally in total defense last year, and they were going to be the same. They're going to be better this year. They could be somewhere closer to the top 10 in total defense. So they were always going to win with defense. Another fact is Jake Retzlaff, whether you appreciate his story or not, was a middling quarterback. Less than 67% completion percentage. He had a 1-to-1 essentially touchdown to interception ratio. So they were winning despite Jake. Jake cost us the Arizona State game last year, throwing that last, which was essentially a go, and the receiver thought it was going to be a cutback type pass. And I don't know whose fault that was, but you can only blame the quarterback on interceptions when you see them and they're blatant like that. At the end of the day, I hope he does well when he moves on, but we're not talking about Jim McMahon or Steve Young or even start Steve Sarkisian at BYU. We're talking about a player that was adequate, maybe a little bit better than average. But in my opinion, we were going to win probably despite Jake this year because of the defense is so strong. I don't think there's a reason why we couldn't do it again this year. Yeah, it's tough when you're going in with either a true freshman. Bachmeyer's a true freshman, but he also graduated from Stanford. Or no, that was his brother, graduated from Stanford in 2.5 years. Tiger is his name. No, Bear was a true freshman transferring from Stanford, but he was a 4-star, one of the highest rated QBs coming out in his draft class. In his recruiting class. So I hope it's Bachmeyer. I think you give the freshman a chance. Zach Wilson was a true freshman when he started at BYU and turned out to be a pretty good quarterback. So that's where I would prefer he goes. If we lose a couple games because he's a true freshman, I'm okay with that. What I don't want is we settle on somebody else just because they have a little bit of experience and we're hoping in some way, shape, or form they don't kill us. A freshman's going to make mistakes. Everybody has to plan on them. But if you have somebody who's got experience and they go out and they still turn the ball over, that will absolutely kill season. BYU is going to win a lot of games on their defense this year, and I don't know. I still have them at 9-3, an outside 10-2 season. They have a pretty good schedule to play against to start a new quarterback. So, we'll have to see.
Yeah, Nathan, and I'm looking at their schedule. They've got 3 very manageable games right out of the gate against Portland State, Stanford at home, at
Yeah.
East Carolina. I don't know who's scheduling for BYU that makes it a necessary trip to go out to East Carolina. Does that
Hopefully
really make
that's
any sense?
changing. Yeah, I think that was an Independence era game that they just didn't buy themselves out of. Yeah, I don't want the trips to Wyoming, the trips to East Carolina. I want to get rid of for
Yeah,
sure.
that just doesn't do BYU any good.
No,
It's
it
just no
doesn't.
reason to
No,
do that.
no.
But they are going to be a substantial favorite in all 3 of those games.
Yeah.
So maybe their quarterback, is able to, get his sea legs and be ready to roll for Colorado in week 4.
Yep.
Very nice.
Really quick on Jake Retzlaff, by the way. We are anticipating him transferring out. You have it exactly right. All the suits were dropped, everybody. The police did an investigation. This kid has been put on a pillory and has been taking darts for the last several months. And it turns out it might have been a whole lot of nothing, which is unfortunate for that to happen. But we certainly in Cougar Nation want to pat him on the back, thank him for the service he did, and I think he can go somewhere that maybe needs a good starting, not starter, but backup quarterback, and he will win some games for you.
It isn't unfortunate, as you mentioned, Nathan, because when something like this is reported, then you can have all the retractions in the world and all the
Yeah.
corrections of, bringing us up to date on what the charges were and that they've been dismissed and exonerated and so forth. And that always sticks around in people's perceptions. So that is unfortunate. So I'm glad that you made that statement.
Sure. Yeah. We want him to do well.
All right, Nathan, is there anything else involving Big 12 football that you wanted to hit on today?
I would just say again, like I said last year, I think about this same time last year when I came on, the Big 12 is going to be an entertaining conference to watch. I'm really anxious that we don't have a team that goes undefeated or 11-1, a couple of those teams, so that we could get 2 teams into the playoff at the end of the year. I don't know where that's going to end up, but I would just tell you, anybody from 1 to 10 going down that list can win the Big 12, and sit back and enjoy. It should be a lot of fun, and hopefully Oklahoma State, hopefully Utah comes back. Kansas State has a more Kansas State type season, and then some of these other teams can step up. Colorado is going to be the real question mark. I would just warn everybody. They got a quarterback position that is kind of up in the air. Their defense has question marks, and they lost all their main receivers to the NFL. So Colorado is going to be one to really interesting to watch this season.
No doubt. Catch Nathan Brown on College Football Mafia. And once again, Nathan, when do you think that you guys are getting back together for a live stream?
Yeah, I'll probably do a show tomorrow. Unless that changes, just follow me on Twitter and I'll tell you the date that I actually have that show. But our next big show is July 11th, which is Friday, and that should be a party.
Awesome.
Okay.
Always good to see you, Nathan.
You too. Thank you, Mark. Good luck to you.
Absolutely. Guy Nathan Brown, College Football Mafia. All right, we keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football, and remind everyone that we are cranking up the Big Ten Live show. That will be the most likely, depending on scheduling, the week of Big Ten Media Days. Corey Brad and myself, that'll be Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So we're going to be busy on Tuesdays as well. We'll do this show, which I may actually back up an hour and do it at 3. We'll see, because once we roll into the season, you're not going to be able to shut me up about college football, because once I got games to talk about, then I'll just, I may kick back in with 5 and 6 hour live streams. We'll see if anyone's watching. So anyway, we will go on Tuesdays with the College Football Show. Big Ten Live, I already screwed it up. the College Football Show at 4 Eastern, Iowa Live at 5, and then the Big Ten Live Show at 6. That will be the Tuesday schedule concerning me, not the entire network, because we got way too many shows for me to run down right now. But for me personally, on Tuesdays, we will have a triple header of the College Football Show, Iowa Live, and then the Big Ten Live Show with tons of good guests. Speaking of which, we got Levi Stevenson standing by, wide right, Natty Light. He's our Iowa State football host at the Voice of College Football. So check out the ISU show. Iowa State, Levi Stevenson should be stopping by here soon. I will be directly after this show going to the Iowa Live show, and we've got Levi showing up there as we preview Cy-Hawk this year. Corey Brad and myself with the Iowa show at 5:30 Eastern. And then hopefully I can just kick back for the rest of the night. I guess I can't, though, because here in the next few weeks, I have promised to deliver all-time program rankings, also our national championship reset. What is that, Mark? We are going to go through every year. I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to be sitting here for 15 hours, 16 hours, whatever it takes. No, I won't do that. I'll probably split it into like 3 shows. But anyway, we are going to go through every season in the history of college football. And we are going to reset the national champions. If you want to know more, just wait until we do it. It will make complete sense. We will be stripping some national championships. We will be adding some national championships. We will be confirming national championships. We will do all of the above, resetting national championships. And I see that Christopher Foote is in the chat. He is going to love this. Love it. Resetting national championships. So be looking out for that live stream. That's going to be a good one. Also, I am releasing all these prediction videos, about 27 of them to date. So I've got quite a few to get to. So we are releasing prediction videos. However, I'm a glutton for punishment. Sometime in the week leading into week 0, sometime that week, we're all going to get together and we are going to go through the entire college football schedule is what we're going to do. We're going to go through the entire schedule. And I'm just going to pick the games. I'm just going to pick them off. Winner, 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 on down the line. Week 0, week 1, week 2. We're going to add up the records. And wherever we land, those will be my final predictions for 2025. So, got a game-by-game prediction live stream coming up late August. We've got the national championship reset, whenever that's going to be in the next couple of weeks. And then also all-time program rankings. And we've got a new Tuesday schedule coming up here in a few weeks with the Big Ten Live show preceded by the College Football Show and the Iowa Live show. Got all that? If you don't, we have more to tell you here because we actually also have a watch party to catch up with. So you have spoken. And our watch party coming up for July is going to involve the Rose Bowl. And we've got Michigan and Bama in the 2024 Rose Bowl. Let's see what the vote landed on here. You can still vote. If you don't want to see this game, you can still vote. But the votes are in. Basically, I've not seen anyone vote on this for a few days. It's been out there for 11 days. And here's the watch party vote for July. 2024 Rose Bowl, Michigan, Alabama, 47%, way out in front of the 2016 Ohio State-Michigan game. And then you've got the Georgia win against Ohio State in the Peach Bowl in 2022. And also then the national championship game of 2016, Clemson and Bama. You see the great Hunter Renfrow hauling in the game-winning touchdown pass with 1 second left. but you want to see Michigan's win against Bama. So we will watch it together. And that should be sometime, let's say, next week. So again, there is still time to unseat Michigan Bama Rose Bowl game as our watch party. The way you can watch the watch party with myself and others is to become a member. You see the membership ticker down at the bottom of the screen. Well, we're going to add to that, hopefully, and you can join us for the watch parties during the off season, one per month. And then the hope, depending on your response, is to get together for a watch party following each weekend. So we'll watch the games on Saturday, take a poll on Sunday, and then bam, we'll be showing up on Monday or Tuesday with a watch party and watching the game of the week from the weekend. The real MVP says the Big 12 is so relevant that their media days are on ESPN U. And otherwise, we are getting some clarification on the BYU conduct code, the honor code. Yes. You must be a good boy while you're in school, or at least not let anyone know about it. Or you've got to, I don't know, you get kicked out of school. Didn't seem like Retzlaff was going to get kicked out of school, but he was going to be suspended for 7 games. All right, we're going to talk Iowa State on the next show. That's the Hawkeyes live show, and that's coming up at 5:30 Eastern, which means we're going to be here for about another hour. And otherwise, while we're waiting on Levi, shoot, give me a call. Also, keep in mind that the audio from all these shows is on your favorite audio platform, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can catch the audio on your favorite audio platform. Also, talking about national champions, there's the book, Disputed National Champions. Check it out. It's on Amazon. So you can order on Amazon. Either just go to Amazon, look up, look at that. No wonder I picked out that. Wow, it was just meant to be, I guess. I don't know. Looks awfully close, but yours truly loved this design, so I went with it. Little did I know Ohio State was going to be putting out shirts that look kind of close. But I think that's kind of the standard look these days, I believe. Disputed National Champions, that's the book. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of others that say that it's a heck of a book, and it's only $9.99. I may raise the price on that. People have asked me to write another one. Maybe not enough people, but people, 5 or 10, have said, Mark, when are you coming out with the 1980s or the 2000s? Well, we get this baby to sell to a certain extent and at least make back the money that I put into it, and we'll write the next one. How about that? So get me to about 4,000 sales, and we will work on the next one. Disputed National Champions, the link's in the description section of this video. Just go on Amazon, and you can order the book. So thank you for that. And thank you for everyone who wanted a signed copy. That's about 25 or 30 of you. So we have sent you a signed copy. If you want a signed copy, just hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. All right. We do have a call coming in. Caden showing up for the daily call. Caden, how are you?
Good, Mark. How are you doing this beautiful afternoon here, sir?
I was outside a few minutes ago. It is beautiful. Yes.
So Big 12 Media Days.
Yes.
Now, one of my favorite conferences in all of college football, besides the Big Ten, home of my Ohio State University Buckeyes, but I'll get to them during the Big Ten media days. And you know what? BYU is a very good team this year, and especially last year. Watching a lot of their tape last year, I feel like this year BYU is going to step up their game, especially now that they're getting a lot of recruits, along with like Iowa State, Arizona State. I feel like that's one of the three teams that's making the playoffs this year for the Big 12. It's either going to be Iowa State, BYU, and then possibly the returning Big 12 champions, Arizona State Sun Devils. Even though Arizona State lost Cam Scatterboo, one of the best tight ends in the country, and
Running backs.
running backs, but I mean he could play tight end if he wanted to. In my opinion, but that's just me. But yeah, I feel like those three teams in the Big 12, I feel like are gonna make the playoffs. Now that's my opinion, but I could be wrong. But don't quote me on.
Okay. So wait a minute. You come on here and make a prediction and then tell us not to quote you on it?
Well, I mean, I could be wrong. I could be right. You know, I say don't quote me on it because I'm like, I could be wrong. I don't want to sound right about the Big 12 because I've been getting a lot of hate for talking about the Big 12 as much as I did over the last couple of months. And literally, my messages on Twitter have literally skyrocketed because of my one comment about the Big 12. And yeah, that kind of got people mad.
Well, I would think that's a good thing. You want your responses on Twitter to skyrocket.
Oh, I mean, oh my gosh. You and Lou, the fan base is messaging me on Twitter, talking about saying my comments about the Big 12 are full of crap, are stupid, pitiful. I mean, the list goes on of insults. I mean, seriously.
So wait a minute. Caden, you told me that I would not believe the number of people telling you that you're stupid and making bad takes.
Yes, I said that correctly.
Okay. I think I would believe it. I don't know. All right. Anything else you got for us today, Caden?
But my other thing is West Virginia. I want to talk just the one part about West Virginia. I've been looking on their social media account for the football team. And I got to say, Coach Rodriguez, even though this is his first year back in Morgantown, I feel like this first year is going to be the start where they maybe go 9-3, 8-5. But maybe after next year or 2 years, they could go 11-1, 10-2 and make a playoff. And, that could be a possibility.
Oh, it's possible. It's not
So,
probable, but it's possible.
I thought I'd throw my hat in the ring and, give my thoughts on the Big 12. Yeah.
Very nice. All right, Caden. Well, we appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, I'll get my ugly carcass out of here because I know there's a lot of people that gonna be coming on here booing me. So I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, Caden. Take care. All right. We see that Caden has endeared himself to the chat once again. All right. I don't know what I got out of all that. Basically, that anything's possible. Anything can happen. Matthew, Mark, genius idea. If someone makes a 3-digit super chat, they can immediately kick the caller off the line. That is a great idea. And I will accept that idea immediately. Absolutely. You know what? I will say we can even take that down to 50. $50, you kick anyone off the line. There it is. 79 Jed Buck will not be making that super chat contribution because he considers that to be a great call. So again, Blue Wolverine, that's how much of a super chat would be required because when Caden calls, that's the only call we've got. So we do have Levi Stevenson showing up here at some point, hopefully soon, because we're going to run into our Iowa show here at 5:30 Eastern. And I just got done with Michigan podcast, so be looking out for that in a few hours. Steve Dace and myself asked me about the future landscape of the Big Ten versus the SEC, but mostly we just sliced and diced his over-under win totals. And he's got some pretty big plays with, let's see, Duke, Oklahoma, Boise State, Ohio State, and Texas on the over-unders. So you get my response there. The last prediction video I released is Ohio State. I think that came out yesterday. I've got to work on prediction videos to get those out very soon. We've got the SEC Media Day starting on Monday, followed by the Big Ten and the ACC the following week. And again, we've got a Big Ten live show that we're starting here in just a couple Tuesdays at 6 Eastern on Tuesdays with our guy Corey Brada. And one of the great stalwarts of the Big 12, of course, stopping by. We got Levi Stevenson here. Iowa State Wide Right Natty Light is the destination on SB Nation for your Iowa State take from Levi and the rest of the crew there. And then, of course, here at the Voice of College Football at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on Tuesday. That makes it quite a string here. You go from here, got you on the Iowa show, then you do your show.
Yeah, it'll be a next couple hours here. It's gonna be a full one of me talking. I'm gonna have to do the vaporizer thing, and then you see like the theater act the Broadway actors do it. They have to do the vaporizer to get their voice back off to get one of those.
Yes, that's a string like I do.
Yeah,
on a regular basis here. So, Levi, we got Brett Yormark. And we've got a 5-11 proposal, of course, and we got the 4-4-2-2-1-1-3 in regards to a playoff proposal. And he seems to be all in on this 5-11, which, based on our conversations, I believe you're, if for no other reason than a PR front to show that we believe we need to be playing on a even footing with the other conferences, you're in favor of his stance.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's just truly on paper, like if you believe that the Big 12 will never, ever, ever have a chance at getting more than 3 ever in a million years, maybe, I guess. But I think maybe you look more at the 4-4-2-2. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, though, is that there's a PR part of this that makes this more complicated. And I was just tuning in a little bit. I was finishing up some work stuff, but when Nathan Brown was in here talking about how he's more of in the 4-4-2-2 camp, and that doesn't surprise me. I think there's decent arguments for it, but I think it's interesting to look at because BYU has only been in the Big 12 for a few years, or for a couple of years now. Two seasons now, whereas Iowa State's been in it from the beginning. And if you were in the Big 12 from 2009 to 2019-ish, I think you take a little bit of a different angle at this because you've been fighting for your life for the last 15 years. I mean, it's not just, I mean, there was a stretch there like in 2010 when Texas A&M and Missouri left, and there was talks about Texas and Oklahoma going to the Pac-12 and all sorts, and and Oklahoma State and Texas Tech falling with them and stuff like that. There was a very real fear for Iowa State, Kansas, maybe even Colorado and a couple other schools. Colorado ended up leaving to the Pac-12, but and a few other schools about if the Big 12 blows up, we might end up in the MAC, or we might end up in Conference USA or whatever it is. Which is, I mean, for Power 5 programs at the time, still now, but. For a power program, getting dropped down to the MAC because you can't find out. I mean, that's horrible. I mean, just look at, I feel bad for like Washington State and Oregon State because they were in the Pac-12 when it was at its height. And then suddenly they're now in it is still technically the Pac-12, but I don't think anybody like views it as a power conference. I mean, they did. I think they added the teams that they needed to make people to like get people to take them as seriously as they could. But I mean, in the end, when your best programs are going to be Boise State, San Diego State, maybe Washington State, but even Oregon State's not any good. I guess I'm not sure what Washington State did last year, but I don't think they were anything super incredible. So it's, I from that perspective, I think when you've been fighting so long to not have everybody else write you off as a conference as a waste of time or as, a conference not worthy of being, then I think forfeiting and just saying, you know what, you're right, and giving it essentially kind of functionally giving up that fight that the Big 12 had to have for the last 15 years and just saying, you know what, you guys are a better conference. You guys are worthy of more than the Big 12. I think that would send a message. I think that would send a poor message to the existing Big 12 members that have been here from the beginning. And I think it would feel a little bit like defeat, because at least with the 5-11 model, you're getting your guaranteed, your champion's going to be in. And, most years, even last year, like I said, last year's Big 12 season was crazy, but you still ended up with, 3 teams sitting around, sitting in that 10-2, 9-3 type mark where you're really right on the bubble of getting a second team in anyways. And I would guess most years you probably have an obvious second team that'd be like, okay, if the Big 12 is going to get a second one, and this is probably it, and they're probably right on the bubble most seasons anyways. So, I think if I'm the Big 12, I like the 5-11 thing, not just because it does maybe theoretically give us a chance to get a third team in at some point. I'm not sure what the scenario would have to look like for that. I think you would need to have 3 teams up there at 10-2, whatever else, and then the SEC beats themselves up a little bit, whatever it is. But you're also, at least at that point, you are still on paper on equal footing as the Big Ten and the SEC. Because I think especially if you admit that your conference is worth half as much as the Big Ten and the SEC, when it comes to future TV negotiations, when it comes to future playoff negotiations, whatever, the Big Ten and the SEC can then immediately say, like, well, you guys admit that you just don't matter as much as us. And I think you lose a big bargaining chip down the road.
Yeah. Although to a certain extent that was already done when the numbers I recall from this latest playoff distribution split was 29% each for the SEC and the Big Ten and 16% for the ACC and the Big 12. So there's already been that concession.
Yeah, but I think the difference though is that the next time TV is negotiated, the Big Ten, and the SEC could legitimately just say we need twice as much as the other schools, bare minimum, because even that you're at 1.8 or 1.7. I mean, they can ask for more and more money, and then let's say down the road, which it kind of seems as though we're headed this direction at some, I don't know what the timeline looks like, but at some point, college football is going to become its own thing with a commissioner or something like that. When it comes to that type of thing, if they can, if you're essentially admitting that you are a lesser conference to the Big Ten and the SEC, when it comes to the formation of whatever college football looks like in 10 years, I think maybe that's an issue too, is that now you can say, now you can just say, well, I've already ceded that we're not as important as the Big Ten and the SEC. And I think that, maybe it's tacitly implied with the TV money and all that already. Like I agree with you that there's at least something there, but at least it was TV deciding what they're going to pay for them versus the conference saying, yep, just you can just pay us less because we're not worth as much.
So Levi, of course, the players and coaches get together to lead off media days for all the conferences, and the first of 2 today. Now, in contrast, the SEC takes an entire week to take the same number of teams, 16
more, right?
Yeah, so that's the SEC's deal. So we'll have a full Monday through Friday of the SEC. So we can spotlight Vanderbilt and Kentucky and so forth, I guess. So anything since I believe you got a chance to hear Matt Campbell and maybe some players today. Anything catch your ear? But as you primed me for earlier this afternoon, maybe we can't expect too much.
Yeah, unfortunately, Matt Campbell is the undisputed, no doubt king of coach speak. When he's talking in a presser, he will say a lot of things that sound very, very nice. In the end, it's not really saying a whole lot that's at least particularly interesting. Oh, like that's a little thing that they can take off. Or there's not. He is the master of not really doing of having these any sound bites that aren't him basically just saying how much he loves Iowa State. However, the few things I have been able to parse out he did bring up that he said it's interesting. There was a quote that I think it was Pete Thamel. I want to say he tweeted and saying that the quote was that Matt Campbell said his top 20 players took a pay cut to stay at Iowa State. Which on its face, there's one of two ways. If you know Matt Campbell, you know how he meant that. But if you don't know him, you're going to say, okay, Iowa State's poor. They can't afford to pay anybody or whatever, which I guess, yeah, sure. If you want to read it that way, you can. However, the context that Pete Thamel did not include with that is that he was saying that they all had opportunities to leave for more money. And so that was an interesting little tidbit there. He basically said that his top 20 guys all had chances to leave for more money. And I'd heard at least a few of them, and I'd heard the number attached to at least a few of them, which was pretty shocking. I mean, Rocco Becht is the obvious one. Ohio State and Tennessee both went after Rocco pretty hard. I know that. Dominic Orange, I know, fielded SEC offers and things like that. But it's interesting that like as soon as that quote came out, because all the Iowa State fans that know Campbell he meant that like they had an opportunity to go someplace else and make more. Not that they literally like cut their NIL payments or whatever and cut those down, which is an absurdity. If they did that, they would just leave. But it's interesting though that's kind of part of the conversation because you talk about when coaches are talking about recruiting now, it's not just about who you can bring in through portal and through high school, but part of recruiting now is recruiting your own players to stay. Player retention is such a massive equation to this, and Iowa State has done a better job than almost anybody in the Power Five as far as keeping players around. They only went and got 8 transfers this offseason, which is about half as many as most teams did. And that's really just because of some graduated seniors and things like that. They didn't really hardly have anybody notable transfer out. I think I believe the last starter that left Iowa State was Asheem Young after the 2020 season when he transferred to Ole Miss. I believe that was the last starter that transferred out. And he's done it. Matt Campbell's done a remarkable job of keeping guys and names. And he said it before in quotes too, but he reiterated today at media days that they recruit guys that are there because they love playing football. That they are there to play the game of football. They're there to get better. Maybe making an NFL career, but in the end, it's for Matt Campbell. The guys that they target a specific type of person, not just a player, but a specific type of person that fits their culture and fits what they want to do. And, if to put it this way is that Matt Campbell you'll never see Matt Campbell chase a recruit that is trying to just get the biggest check. If it came down to, for Jet Tamala, which is this quarterback that just flipped to Alabama a few weeks ago, if it came down to, he would stay if Iowa State wrote a bigger check or whatever, there's no shot that Matt Campbell is writing that check. And even if they can, they're not going to, because immediately you are flagging yourself as that's just not the kind of person we're trying to recruit. And it's, it's not that they won't pay guys that are deserving, because they've, come out and say that, it's a merit-based program. TJ Otzelberger for the basketball program did that as well, and said that their revenue distribution and all that NIL stuff is much more based on merit at Iowa State. So, they're not gonna write freshmen, $500,000 checks. That's just not gonna happen. That's not how it works at Iowa State. And are they gonna miss out on some recruits because of that? Maybe. But for Matt Campbell, I know he's okay with that. He can live with that and live with himself, knowing that he didn't bow down to essentially a teenager, trying to do something that is not in line with what he wants his football program to be about.
We had a conversation earlier today on the Ohio State show that there might eventually, here and not too long in the distant future, be a backlash against throwing so much money at these high school players because it's just not a proven commodity. And
It's a bad investment.
Yeah, it's a bad investment, especially at certain positions. Offensive line, they typically don't play for quite a long time, and you're going to pay millions of dollars to a guy that's sitting on the bench. Or
I mean, how many athletes turn out to be worth $500,000 or $1 million out of high school? Almost none.
Yeah. Compared to seeing, okay, a guy played and performed well at, let's say, the group of 5 level for a couple of years, and he's worth taking a shot because he's proven himself. So yeah, I think that may bring some normalcy back to it, hopefully.
We'll see, though, because now you've got, I mean, in the end, though, it's college football. And if there's anything that's been proven in college football, it's that fan bases and schools are willing to pay virtually any amount of money to be able to say that they beat their rival last weekend. And to be able to say that they, won their conference last season, their rival didn't, or whatever it is. They will shell out enormous amounts of money. Now that it's essentially, now that college football is essentially crowdfunded via NIL and all that, hopefully market forces take over at some point. But now you look at like Texas Tech, who is now suddenly the biggest spender in college football because they are backed by a multi-billion-dollar oil tycoon now, who has not been one bit afraid to throw around every single dollar they can find and land an enormous amount of players. And not for oil, but BYU is also starting to throw a lot of cash around too. They did, especially on the basketball side, but now they're starting to get some big football recruits and stuff like that they weren't getting before. And I'm not trying to like disparage that because I still am I am personally like in favor of athletes getting what they're worth and all of that. Like I'm, not, there's just something that feels a little icky about essentially oil money paying for college football players. Doesn't it feel a little icky?
Absolutely, it does.
Like, and it's like they're getting paid. I shouldn't say that they're not. For a long time, they have not been getting paid because they're good at football. They're getting paid because they exist in college football. But hopefully at some point the market forces correct themselves a little bit, and they, we start to see more merit-based systems and say, okay, you'll get something as a freshman. You get plenty to live on and make a decent little salary or whatever. But then as you play more, as you get more experience, as you prove yourself, gain accolades, whatever it is, maybe Ohio State's done their helmet stickers forever, and that's kind of their thing. Maybe NIL dollars are the new helmet stickers. And maybe Ohio State ties NIL dollars to helmet stickers, as that's their mark. That's their marker of, how good you are at the game. It'd be interesting to see how this fleshes out. And like I hope that in someday, if their college football does split out into its own sport, has its own commissioner and all that stuff, if that does happen, I would hope that the infrastructure of that league has some sort of restrictions on that type of thing, that, a salary cap on freshmen and a salary cap on your roster or something like that. Though the idea of still having a salary cap in college sports is still a very strange notion, but yeah.
We got Levi Stevenson here. You can catch him every Tuesday night at 8 Eastern and 7 Central. That's over on the Iowa State channel, breaking down the Cyclones and talking college football across the board. And of course, a focus on the Big 12. And Levi's going to join us on the Iowa show here in just a few minutes. So I don't want to take too much Iowa State away from the analysis, but I'll bring this up that I was looking at previous recruiting classes and looking for something else. And I noticed that Rocco Becht was the 61st rated quarterback in his class. And I thought, my goodness, because, the top 5 hit, bam, bam, bam. And then after that, it just kind of dissipates pretty quickly. And then, you get outside the top 20 or 5 yeah. And, it's a wasteland. And it was Fernando Mendoza was ranked similarly, who's obviously hit pretty well at Cal and now Indiana. And it was Rocco. So you got him back this year, and the two stud wide receivers, of course, get plucked up by the Houston Texans. That's kind of unusual that two wide receivers go in the same draft to the same team from the same team.
And to a team that already has one receiver from that school.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Texans currently have Xavier Hutchinson and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of Texans, 49ers, and Jets fans in cycling football right now.
Yeah. So my question about Rocco Becht is just, is there any expected continued progression? Do you think he's maxed out, or are there obvious chinks in his armor that can be cleaned up?
So the interesting thing with Rocco Becht is when they were recruiting him out of high school, you can watch his high school film, you can watch how he plays now, and you can immediately see who the blueprint was for when they were recruiting this guy, because you can tell as soon as they turned on his high school film, they're like, that's Brock Purdy. That you can watch him and look at that. Now Rocco is a little bit more of a powerful runner than Brock was, where Brock was more finesse, but just kind of what they do, their games do resemble each other a lot. But what we've seen so far out of Rocco, I mean, he started as a redshirt freshman. Amazingly, Rocco is just a redshirt junior this year. Even though he feels like he's been around forever. His freshman season, he wasn't asked to do a ton, but he was efficient. I think he threw like 67, 68%, somewhere in there. Was efficient, did his job. Last year, we saw a regression in terms of really just raw passing efficiency. I think he's dropped down like 59% completions. He threw some more interceptions. Unfortunately, a lot of those interceptions ended up being pick sixes. But we did also see him really evolve his running game, his ability not just to scramble out, but actually just being as a designed runner out of read options and things like that. So we saw a nice little thing. We also saw that Rocco's got the gamer gene. Rocco's, fourth quarter Rocco is about as good a quarterback as you can ask for in college football. Unfortunately, last year the first three quarters were a little bit chaotic at times, but when you came down to the fourth quarter and you were trying to put together a game-winning drive, Rocco's the guy you wanted out there, and he proved it a few different times last year. UCF led that last-minute one down there. Iowa, gosh, that throw to Jalen Noel on the sideline against Iowa was unbelievable. He made tons of games where maybe he made the game more difficult earlier in the game because he threw a bad pick six or whatever it was, like UCF, where he threw two pick sixes. But then he also would win the game with heroics late in the game. So the natural progression is make it so you don't have to do the game-winning drives later on. We've already seen that he can be an efficient, accurate quarterback. We saw that his freshman year. So, I think his regression in that category this past season was kind of the classic sophomore slump. People have tape on you. They've got a little more film. They're trying to get things in order. You lose Ben Bramer earlier in the season, the tight end. So you lose one of your bigger targets, and they're trying to find that. They're trying to get the running back position kind of going into this season. I expect his completion percentage to get back up like over 65. Iowa State's offense is built to have pretty high completion percentages, not necessarily just because it's like all dink and dunk behind the line of scrimmage, like you saw with like Shadur Sanders at Colorado. But you see, Brock Purdy threw over 70% a couple times. It's an offense that absolutely can be efficient, and Rocco's, his raw, arm talent, I guess, is above average and absolutely can be an asset there. So it's really mainly just cutting down on some of the silly mistakes. He doesn't actually turn the ball over a lot, but just last year they were kind of catastrophic mistakes. So it's, when you're throwing an out route to the wide side of the field, a 6-yard out route to the wide side of the field, it's making sure that you're getting it out further and not accidentally underthrowing it where guys can just pick it off and take it to the house. It's those types of things where you expect to see from the underclassmen to the upperclassmen, and just making smarter throws that, on those types of routes, if you're going to miss high and wide, not low and short, that type of thing. But, if he can continue to be an effective runner and continue to be a great on the field leader vocally and just in his play, I think we'll see Rocco be absolutely in the consideration for like best quarterback in the conference and things like that. He can be an all Big 12 guy for sure.
All right. Again, Tuesday nights, your time to catch Levi here at the Voice of College Football on the Iowa State Show at 8 Eastern and 7 Central. And it's every day at Wide Right Natty Light on SB Nation. All right, Levi, I will let you save some for the Iowa show, and where I get to kick back and let you and Corey go at it.
Me and Corey bicker for an hour. It's always fun. This one's always a fun time.
I've got some position rankings in front of me from some national publications, and I'm curious to get your take between Iowa State on some of those. So that'll just be part of the fun.
I think there'll be a good one because I think there's a couple positions that are up for that are contested. I think there's a pretty easy lean one way or the other on a lot of them. But yeah, it'll be fun. Big good discussion.
Cool. Thanks, Levi. Good to see you. See you in a few. All right. We've done the good work here at the Voice of College Football for another Tuesday. You will see me in just about 25 minutes on the Iowa channel. And we'll remind you, we've got a Big Ten live show coming back. Corey and myself and all of you every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. That starts in a couple of weeks. Please use the Amazon link in the description section of all the videos. It's there. It's the one way you can contribute here at the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Yes, so please grab the Amazon link and put it somewhere where you will remember it when you do your shopping. That is paramount, folks. And we would love to partner with somebody. If you have an idea for a sponsor, whether it's a business you own, personal brand, products, services, whatever it is, we have never partnered with anyone that has not benefited and told us flat out it was a great experience. So we would love to get some sponsors here. And really, we are in the market for sponsors here at the Voice of College Football. See you in about 20 minutes on the Iowa channel, and we will see you tomorrow as well.